Nero Wolfe and the Collector of Secrets, a Nero Wolfe style noir mystery. Chapter 1, The Man Who Never Spoke. I was halfway through convincing myself that the day would pass without violence, mystery, or Inspector Kramer's voice when the doorbell rang. That alone should have warned me. It was a Tuesday afternoon, the kind Nero Wolfe considered suitable only for routine: orchids at 11, beer at 4, dinner at 7 sharp, and no interruptions in between unless the world was ending or the house was on fire. The world, so far as I could tell, was still intact. I had just finished typing a letter Wolfe dictated, 6 paragraphs explaining why he would not attend a committee meeting he had never agreed to attend, when Fritz announced the visitor. "He says he has an appointment," Fritz told me, his accent turning the word into something elegant and suspicious. "But he does not say his name." Wolfe, planted in his red leather armchair like a monument that had learned to breathe, did not look up from the book resting on his stomach. "Then he does not have an appointment," he said. "Names are a prerequisite to existence." "I asked twice," Fritz added. He smiled. That did it. Anyone who smiled at Fritz without explaining himself was either harmless or dangerous, and experience had taught me not to bet the rent on harmless. I stood up. "I'll handle it." The man waiting in the front hall looked like money that had learned to behave itself. Middle-aged, immaculate gray suit, shoes polished to a mirror, no hat, no overcoat despite the bite in the March air. His face was calm in the way you see on bank vaults and undertakers. When I offered my hand, he shook it lightly, like a courtesy extended rather than an impulse. "Archie Goodwin," I said. "And you are?" He smiled again. Same smile. Controlled. Unrevealing. "I prefer not to say," he replied. "Then you'll prefer the sidewalk," I said pleasantly. "House rules." "I believe Mr. Wolfe will see me," he said. "If you tell him what I collect." That was interesting enough to buy him 10 seconds. "What do you collect?" I asked. "Secrets." I stared at him. He stared back, serene as a monk with a Swiss bank account. "Come in," I said finally. "But don't expect applause." I led him into Wolfe's office. Wolfe raised his eyes this time, taking in the visitor with the practiced economy of a man who could dismantle a personality in under a minute. The visitor did not flinch, which was either confidence or experience. "Mr. Wolfe," the man said, inclining his head. "Thank you for receiving me." "I have not yet done so," Wolfe replied. "Sit. And speak efficiently." The man sat. He crossed his legs neatly, hands folded, posture perfect. If he was nervous, he hid it better than most men hide a mistress. "My profession," he said, "is the acquisition and preservation of confidential information." Wolfe's eyes sharpened. I leaned against the desk, interested despite myself. "You blackmail people?" I asked. "No," the man said calmly. "I protect them." Wolfe snorted. "Nonsense. Information exists to be used." "Not all information," the man replied. "Some exists only to be contained. To prevent harm." Wolfe studied him. "Proceed." The man explained. Powerful clients, politicians, financiers, industrialists, entrusted him with truths they could never allow to surface. Illicit affairs, financial crimes, hidden identities, past betrayals. He documented everything, stored it securely, and guaranteed silence. He was paid handsomely for being a vault that walked and breathed. "And now," Wolfe said, "you are no longer secure." The man nodded. "Someone has accessed my collection." That was when the room cooled a few degrees. "Accessed how?" I asked. "Copied," he said. "Not everything. Only specific items." Wolfe's fingers steepled. "You kept records?" "Yes." "You indexed them?" "Yes." "You catalogued human disgrace," Wolfe said, with something close to distaste. And now you fear exposure. I fear murder, the man said softly. That got Wolfe's attention in a hurry. One of my clients is dead, the man continued. Officially, of a heart attack. Unofficially, he hesitated for the first time. Unofficially, he received a message the night before. A message that quoted a secret only I knew. I felt a prickle at the back of my neck. You didn't send it. No. Someone else did, Wolfe said. To demonstrate possession. Yes. Wolfe leaned back. Why come to me? Because, the man said, you do not move. You think. And because once you accept a problem, you do not abandon it. Wolfe's lips tightened. Compliments were wasted on him, but accuracy never was. Names, Wolfe said. The man shook his head. Not yet. Then I refuse, Wolfe said promptly. Archie, escort. The man reached into his jacket and placed an envelope on Wolfe's desk. He did not open it. He did not need to. Wolfe looked at it. Did not touch it. What is it? Wolfe asked. A copy, the man said. Of a secret that does not belong to me. Silence settled in the room, thick as cigar smoke. Wolfe's voice, when it came, was very soft. You have made an error. Yes, the man agreed. I have underestimated the appetite of others. Wolfe opened the envelope at last. He read one page. His expression did not change, but his eyes hardened. This, he said, will suffice, for now. I straightened. You're taking the case. I am accepting the problem, Wolfe corrected. Which is not the same thing. He looked at the man. You will remain available. You will provide names. You will answer questions. And you will not attempt to manage events. The man inclined his head. Of course. And, Wolfe added, you will understand that secrecy is no longer a luxury you can afford. The man smiled faintly. It never was. When he left, the office seemed quieter. Too quiet. I looked at Wolfe. Well? He closed his eyes briefly. Archie, this man believes secrets are static objects. And they're not. They are weapons, Wolfe said. And someone has learned how to aim. I glanced at the envelope still on the desk. You think there'll be another death? Yes. When? Wolfe opened his eyes. Soon. That was when the phone rang. And I knew the day had officially gone bad. Chapter 2, A Secret That Walks In. The phone call Wolfe predicted arrived with the subtlety of a brick through a plate glass window. I snatched up the receiver on Wolfe's desk before it could ring a second time, partly to protect Wolfe's nerves, and partly because Wolfe considered ringing phones a personal insult. Goodwin speaking, I said. A man's voice, clipped and official, said, homicide. Lieutenant Mallory. Is Mr. Wolfe there? I looked across at Wolfe. He was back in his chair, eyes narrowed, fingers steepled as if he'd been expecting the call the way Fritz expects the roast to be done at precisely the right minute. Yes, I said. But you're talking to me. Tell him, Mallory said, that Edward Lasker is dead. And it's not a heart attack. The line clicked. That was it. No invitation, no courtesy, no hanging around to see if we'd cry. I set the receiver down slowly. Well, I said, the city's improving. They're getting blunt. Wolfe's eyes were on my face. Details. Lieutenant Mallory, homicide. Edward Lasker is dead, and it's not a heart attack. Wolfe closed his eyes for a beat and opened them again, like a man adjusting focus on an unpleasant painting. Lasker, he said. Financial. I blinked. You know him? I know of him, Wolfe corrected. A partner in a respectable firm with an appetite for the disreputable. The dead man our visitor referenced. I nodded. The collector, our nameless, well-tailored vault, had mentioned a client who died, officially, of a heart attack after receiving a message that quoted a secret only the collector knew. Now homicide was saying it wasn't a heart attack at all. I said, "You want me to call the collector back?" "No," Wolfe said. "He will come." "That's faith," I said. "It is inference," Wolfe replied. "A man who lives by secrets responds quickly when his own security is compromised." I was about to argue when the doorbell rang again. I glanced at Wolfe. Wolfe looked at me. Neither of us smiled. When I opened the door, the collector stood there exactly as before, same gray suit, same smooth control, except his eyes were a shade darker. Not fear, exactly. More like a man who has seen the first crack appear in his bank vault. "I received your message," he said. "We didn't send one," I said. "Come in." He followed me into the office, and Wolfe did not bother with pleasantries. "You will now supply your name," Wolfe said. The man's jaw tightened. "Nathaniel Quaid." Finally, Wolfe said, as if the name had been overdue since 1903. "Sit. And speak." Quaid sat, hands folded again. But this time I noticed something. The skin along his right thumb was raw, like he'd worried it with his nail. A nervous habit he hadn't displayed in the hall. So the vault had a weak hinge after all. "I was informed," Quaid said, "that Edward Lasker is dead." "Not merely dead," Wolfe said. "Murdered." Quaid's eyes flicked to mine and back to Wolfe. "You already know." "We know as much as Lieutenant Mallory chose to share," I said. Which was nothing except the headline. Quaid inhaled carefully. The message Lasker received was typed. No signature. It quoted a line from a letter he wrote in 1937, an apology to a woman in Paris. Only I possessed the original. Wolfe's voice was mild. "And now someone else has it." "Or had it," Quaid said. "Enough to quote." I said, "Why didn't you go to the police?" Quaid's smile was thin. "Because the police are a public institution. My work is private." Wolfe's eyes hardened. "Your work is parasitic." Quaid did not flinch. "Perhaps. But it kept certain men from destroying themselves and others." Wolfe made a sound that could have been a laugh if you were generous. "You are not a priest, Mr. Quaid. You are a merchant." Quaid's fingers tightened slightly, then relaxed. "If you insist. But I have never sold a secret. I stored them. I protected them." "And you profited," Wolfe said. Quaid's gaze shifted, and there it was, the first contradiction of the day. Not in his words, but in his posture. He wanted Wolfe to believe he was noble, but the truth was he was proud. Not of morality, but of control. Wolfe said, "Tell us about your collection." Quaid hesitated, then reached into his inside pocket and produced a small leather notebook. He placed it on Wolfe's desk like a man placing a gun down without surrendering it. "This is not the collection," Quaid said. "It is the index." Wolfe did not touch it. He never touched anything without deciding whether it was a trap, a smear, or a distraction. I did. I flipped it open. Neat, tight handwriting, names reduced to initials, dates, locations, and a code that looked like a librarian had designed it after a bad dream. It gave me the creeps, which is always a good sign in my line of work. "How many?" I asked. Quaid's voice was quiet. "Hundreds." Wolfe's lips thinned. "And where are the physical records?" Quaid's eyes stayed steady. "In a safe location." "Where?" "In a private storage facility," Quaid said. "That is not a location," Wolfe said. Quaid's expression tightened. "You asked for my name. You have it. Do not ask for everything in one afternoon." Wolfe stared at him a long moment. "You came to me because you want my protection. Yet you deny me the information required to provide it." Quaid opened his mouth, closed it, and then said, "The facility is on East 46th Street. A private building. The records are in a vault. Only I have the access key." Wolfe's eyes flicked to me. The chemistry between us didn't require a laboratory, a glance did the job. "Archie," Wolfe said, "you will go there." "Sure," I said. "And while I'm at it, should I pick up a milkshake for the killer?" Wolfe ignored that. "You will confirm the security. You will observe. You will speak to whoever manages the building. And you will be cautious." Quaid leaned forward slightly. "The vault has not been breached physically," he said. "I checked this morning." Wolfe's tone turned sharp. "Then how was the information copied?" Quaid swallowed. "That is the question." "Not the only question," Wolfe said. "Who knew Lasker's secret existed?" Quaid hesitated a fraction of a second too long. "No one." I said, "That's a nice answer. It's also impossible." Quaid's eyes met mine. "I told you. I protect them." "You protect them," I said, "like a lion protects a steak." Wolfe's mouth twitched, his version of Archie-approved humor. Then he leaned forward. "Mr. Quaid," Wolfe said, "you are in danger not because you possess secrets, but because you have organized them." Quaid's brows drew together. Wolfe continued, "A thief stealing random documents risks nothing but discovery. But a thief stealing an index steals power. Your index is a map. If someone has copied it." Quaid's face tightened. "Then," Wolfe finished, "you have created a weapon that can kill without firing a bullet." I shut the notebook softly. "And apparently it has." The silence that followed had teeth. Finally Quaid said, "I have not lost the index." Wolfe's voice was icy. "Not to your knowledge." Quaid sat very still. Then he reached into his pocket and withdrew something else, a folded sheet of paper, creased neatly, as though it had been read and reread. He placed it on the desk, carefully, like it might explode. "This arrived at my home," Quaid said. "An hour ago." Wolfe's eyes locked on it. "Do not touch it," he told me. I held up my hands. "I'm innocent." Quaid said, "It was delivered by hand. No stamp." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "And what does it say?" Quaid's voice was flat. "It lists 3 initials from my index. Then it says, choose one to lose. The rest will pay." I felt my stomach drop an inch. "That's cozy." Wolfe's face remained calm, but I knew him. Beneath that calm was a machine that had begun to turn. "Mr. Quaid," Wolfe said, "you will now do what you should have done yesterday, you will provide me with names. Full names. And you will tell me who might want to seize your collection." Quaid's jaw worked. "If I do that." "If you do not," Wolfe snapped, "you will die. And your secrets will become street corner merchandise." Quaid held Wolfe's gaze. Then, slowly, he nodded. "All right," he said. "There are 4 people who know the vault exists." I leaned forward. "Now we're getting somewhere." Quaid began listing them, an assistant who handled his appointments, a lawyer who drafted his contracts, a building manager at the storage facility, and a former partner he'd dismissed a year ago. I caught Wolfe's eyes again. 4 names, 4 possible motives, and an index that could ruin men by the dozen. And somewhere in mid-century New York, among taxis and diners, brownstones and shadows, someone was holding a secret like a knife and deciding where to stick it next. Wolfe spoke quietly, almost to himself. "Archie. Go to East 46th. Right away," I said. "Any other errands? Maybe flowers for the funeral?" Wolfe's eyes did not leave Quaid. "Be careful," he said. For Wolfe, that was practically an embrace that I grabbed my coat and hat, and as I stepped out into the brownstone's dim hall, the smell of orchids followed me like a warning, because once secrets started walking, they rarely stopped until somebody fell. Chapter 3, The Dead Cannot Collect. If you want to see New York at its least charming, try arriving at a crime scene just after the police have decided you're in the way. Edward Lasker's apartment was on the Upper East Side, the kind of building with a uniformed doorman, quiet carpets, and a lobby that smelled faintly of money and lemon polish. I'd barely given my name when Lieutenant Mallory decided he didn't like the sound of it. "Goodwin," he said, squinting at me like I'd been dropped from a bad tree. "You work for Nero Wolfe." "I type for him," I said modestly. "He does the thinking." Mallory snorted. "The coroner says heart failure. I say poison. And Wolfe isn't invited." "That's funny," I said. "Because Wolfe doesn't go anywhere." That earned me a glare, but he waved me through. The apartment itself was immaculate, too immaculate. No dishes, no clutter, no life. The sort of place that suggested Lasker spent most of his time elsewhere and slept here like a guest. The body was still there, stretched out on the bed as neatly as if he'd lain down to wait for a train. Late 50s, well-fed, well-groomed. His face was calm. That was the problem. "Heart attack," I said. Mallory shook his head. "No signs of struggle. No pills. No alcohol." But the coroner found something odd in the bloodstream. Trace compound. Colorless. Tasteless. "Convenient," I said. "Too convenient," Mallory agreed. "Any ideas?" I smiled. "I collect opinions, Lieutenant. Not secrets." That bought me nothing but a grunt. I took a slow look around. Bedside table, lamp, book, empty glass. Desk across the room, papers stacked with accountant precision. No note. No drama. "Who found him?" I asked. "Doorman," Mallory said. "Didn't show up for breakfast downstairs." Lasker was a creature of habit. That word again. Habit. Wolfe would like that. I excused myself and stepped into the hall, pulled a phone from my pocket, and found a quiet corner. When I called the brownstone, Fritz answered. "Is Mr. Wolfe available?" I asked. "He is always available," Fritz said. "But not always receptive." "Put him on." Wolfe's voice came on, deep and irritated. "Archie. Report." "Lasker's dead all right," I said. "Poison, probably. No mess. No note. Habitual breakfast missed." "Ah," Wolfe said. "Methodical." "There's more," I added. "The place is clean enough to host a convent. Nothing disturbed. Which means whoever did it knew exactly what they wanted." "Or wanted nothing," Wolfe said. "Continue." I told him about the empty glass, the lack of pills, the trace compound. Wolfe hummed softly, a dangerous sound, like a kettle just before it screams. "Return," he said. "We have work to do." By the time I got back to the brownstone, dusk had settled in like a permanent tenant. Wolfe was already in his chair, beer at hand, orchids attended, routine intact as if murder were an inconvenience rather than an event. Quaid sat stiffly opposite him, hands clasped, eyes fixed on the carpet. "You saw him," Quaid said when I entered. "Yes," I said. "He looked peaceful." Quaid closed his eyes briefly. "He was not a peaceful man." Wolfe leaned forward. "Mr. Quaid, the police believe Lasker was poisoned." Quietly. Professionally. Quaid swallowed. Then the message was a warning. "No," Wolfe said sharply. "It was a demonstration." Quaid looked up. "Of what?" "Of access," Wolfe said. "To Lasker's secret. And to his life." I dropped into my chair and said, "Let's talk suspects." Quaid nodded reluctantly. "You already have 4 names. Now we need motives," I said. "And opportunity." Wolfe gestured to Quaid. Begin with the former partner. Quaid's jaw tightened. Martin Hale. We founded the business together. He wanted to monetize the secrets, sell them, trade them. I refused. We parted ways. Amicably? I asked. No, Quaid said. Legally. Which means expensively, I said. Precisely. Wolfe nodded. Next. My lawyer, Quaid continued. Elaine Porter. She drafted the contracts. She knows the structure, not the contents. Lawyers know how to keep secrets, I said. They also know how to weaponize them. Quaid flinched. The building manager, Wolfe prompted. Samuel Klein, Quaid said. He handles maintenance. Access control. He is discreet. That's not a character reference, I said. That's a job description. And the assistant? Wolfe asked. Rachel Moore, Quaid said quietly. She schedules appointments. Screens clients. She knows who I meet, but not why. Wolfe sat back. 4 people with proximity. Only one with a demonstrated desire for power. Hale, I said. Possibly, Wolfe said. But do not be seduced by obviousness. I leaned forward. Quaid, did Lasker know Hale? Quaid hesitated. Not personally. Did Hale know Lasker? I pressed. Quaid's hesitation lasted a beat too long. He knew of him. I looked at Wolfe. Wolfe looked at Quaid. That, Wolfe said, is interesting. Quaid's voice was tight. The financial world is small. Quaid stood abruptly. This is spiraling. Wolfe's voice was calm. It will continue to spiral until the center is identified. Quaid's eyes were wild now. Someone is killing my clients. Yes, Wolfe said. And someone else is watching to see if you will fold. I said, there's something bothering me. Wolfe raised an eyebrow. Only one thing. Lasker received a typed message quoting a letter from 1937, I said. Typed. Yes, Wolfe said. Proceed. Who types anymore? I asked. Everyone else uses phones, telegrams, handwriting. Typing is deliberate. Old-fashioned. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Affectation. Or a clue, I said. Someone comfortable with old habits. Someone who likes systems. Quaid sat slowly. Hale uses a typewriter. Wolfe's gaze snapped to him. Why did you not mention that earlier? Quaid's voice was barely audible. Because I did not want it to be him. Wolfe leaned back, fingers steepled. Emotion clouds judgment. We must not permit it. The phone rang again. This time I didn't like the sound of it at all. I answered. A woman's voice, tight with fear, said, Mr. Goodwin. This is Rachel Moore. Quaid shot to his feet. What is it? She's shaking, I said. What happened, Miss Moore? There was a pause. Then, someone broke into Mr. Quaid's office. Wolfe's eyes closed briefly. Did they take anything? I asked. I don't know, she said. But they left something. What? I asked. Her voice dropped to a whisper. A copy. Of the index. I hung up slowly. Wolfe opened his eyes. It begins. Quaid sank back into his chair, pale, and I knew then that Edward Lasker would not be the last man to die for a secret he no longer owned. Chapter 4, The Price of Silence. By the time I got my coat back on, the brownstone smelled like orchids and trouble, both of which tend to linger. Wolfe had not moved from his chair. He rarely did when the situation grew complicated. Motion, he believed, was an admission of uncertainty. Instead, he sat there with his eyes half-lidded, fingers steepled, while Quaid paced like a man whose shadow had started whispering behind him. "Archie," Wolfe said, "you will visit Miss Moore immediately." I was already halfway to the door. "Office or home?" "Office," Wolfe said. "Thieves who leave messages often wish to be admired. They choose the stage carefully." Quaid stopped pacing. "You think this is performance?" Wolfe opened his eyes. "Murder is always performance. The audience determines the style." I took a taxi down to Midtown, the city sliding past in streaks of neon and shadow. The driver hummed something tuneless. I watched the clock and thought about indexes. Not the kind at the back of books, the kind that reduce people to entries, and lives to references. Someone had copied Quaid's index and left it behind like a calling card. That took confidence. Or contempt. Rachel Moore met me at the office door. She was young, efficient-looking, and trying very hard not to look terrified. It wasn't working. "They didn't break anything," she said, unlocking the door. "That's what frightens me." Inside, the office was neat to the point of sterility. Desk cleared. Files aligned. A place designed to forget itself. "Show me," I said. She led me to Quaid's private office. On the desk lay a manila folder, placed squarely in the center like an offering. Inside was a sheaf of pages, typed, double-spaced, precise. "Is this the index?" I asked. "No," she said. "A copy of part of it. The initials correspond." I scanned a page. It was clinical. Initials. Dates. Cities. Codes. No emotion. No names. And at the bottom of the last page, typed neatly, "Silence has a price." "Any idea who left it?" I asked. She shook her head. The cleaning staff was gone by 6. The alarm never tripped. "Which means," I said, "whoever did this knew the system." Her hands twisted together. "I don't know anything about the contents." "I swear." "I believe you," I said. "Which makes you dangerous." Her eyes widened. "What?" "Because killers prefer people who don't know they're holding the knife," I said gently. "Anyone been asking questions lately?" She hesitated. "Mr. Hale called last week." There it was. What did he want? "He asked if Mr. Quaid still kept records," she said. I told him I didn't know. "Did he seem angry?" She considered. "No." "Calm." I grimaced. "That's worse." Back in the taxi, I called Wolfe from a diner with cracked leather booths and coffee that tasted like it had given up on life. "Hale called Moore," I said. "Asking about records." Wolfe's voice came through, calm and heavy. "Predictable." "There's more," I said. "The copy they left wasn't random. It was curated. Specific initials." "Ah," Wolfe said. "Selection implies intention." "And pressure," I added. "Yes," Wolfe said. "The murderer is negotiating." When I got back to the brownstone, Wolfe was finishing his beer. Fritz hovered nearby like a concerned orchestra conductor. "Dinner will be delayed," Wolfe said to Fritz. "Murder intrudes." Fritz sighed tragically and withdrew. Quaid sat rigidly on the edge of his chair. "Did you find anything?" "Yes," I said. "Proof that whoever's doing this wants you scared, not dead." "Yet." "Yet," Wolfe echoed. Important word. Quaid rubbed his temples. "They copied the index. They can ruin people. Or kill them," I said. Wolfe raised a finger. "Archie, enumerate the reactions." I blinked. "The reactions?" "Of our suspects," Wolfe said. "When confronted with partial truth." "Oh," I said. "You want psychology." "I want leverage," Wolfe corrected. We began with Hale. I paid him a visit the next morning at his office, a sleek place that smelled of ambition and old paper. Hale himself was tall, handsome, and relaxed in the way of a man who believed the world owed him interest. "Quade's in trouble," I said casually. Hale smiled. "He always was. Someone copied his index." Hale's smile flickered, just a flicker, but enough. "That's unfortunate." "Lasker's dead," I said. That got me a pause. "So I heard." "Heart attack," I said. "Isn't that what happens to men like him?" Hale replied smoothly. I left without pressing further. Wolfe wouldn't want me to. He preferred pressure applied slowly, like a vice that pretends to be polite. Next was Elaine Porter, the lawyer. Her office smelled of leather and restraint. "Quade keeps secrets," I said. "So do I," she replied. "That's my profession." "Someone's killing his clients." She stiffened. "That's not amusing." "No," I agreed. "It's expensive." Her eyes sharpened. "If you're suggesting—" "I'm suggesting nothing," I said. "I'm observing." She leaned back. Quade's system was flawed. "How?" I asked. "It's centralized power," she said. "That always attracts thieves." "Or collectors," I said. She didn't like that. The building manager, Klein, was last. He was a small man with careful manners and a face that blended into wallpaper. When I mentioned the vault, he went pale. "I only maintain the building," he said. "You maintain access," I replied. That night, Wolfe gathered us, Quade, Hale, Porter, and Klein, in the office. The room felt tighter with every body added, the orchids looming like silent jurors. Wolfe began gently. "We are here to discuss silence." No one spoke. "Silence," Wolfe continued, "is purchased. Maintained. Enforced. Mr. Quade made a business of it. Someone else has decided to revise the terms." Hale crossed his legs. "You're accusing someone." "I am observing," Wolfe said. "Accusations are premature." He gestured to me. "Archie." I stepped forward. "We found a copy of the index. Partial. Selective. Someone wanted to prove possession, not chaos." Porter frowned. "That's insane." "No," Wolfe said. "It is disciplined." Klein wiped his brow. "I don't understand." Wolfe's eyes locked on him. "Then you are either innocent or accomplished." Klein swallowed. Wolfe turned to Hale. "You wanted to monetize the secrets." Hale shrugged. "Quade was sentimental." "And sentiment," Wolfe said, "is inefficient." Hale smiled thinly. Wolfe turned to Porter. "You warned of centralization." She nodded. "I advised safeguards." "Which were ignored," Wolfe said. Finally, Wolfe addressed Quade. "You believed control equaled safety." Quade's voice cracked. "I protected them." "You protected yourself," Wolfe said softly. The room buzzed with tension. No one confessed. No one cracked, except one. Klein shifted, eyes darting. I need air." Wolfe raised a hand. "No." Klein froze. "That," Wolfe said quietly, "is the reaction of a man who fears exposure." Klein shook his head. "I never touched the files." "Perhaps not," Wolfe said. "But you facilitated access." Klein opened his mouth. The phone rang. I answered. Inspector Kramer's voice was grim. "Archie. Another one's gone." My stomach dropped. "Who?" "Assistant District Councilman," Kramer said. "Found dead in his office. No sign of struggle." I looked at Wolfe. He closed his eyes briefly. Silence, Wolfe said, has been repriced. As the call ended, I realized something else, something small, something Wolfe had been watching all along. Only one person in the room looked satisfied. And that, I knew, was going to cost someone dearly before it was over. Chapter 5, When Secrets Fight Back. If you've never tried sleeping in a house where every shadow looks like it knows your middle name, I don't recommend starting now. The night after the second killing, the brownstone felt awake in all the wrong ways. The orchids gave off their heavy, humid scent, the sort that usually calmed Wolfe and put me in mind of jungles and patience. This time it only made the air feel thick, like a room where too many words had already been spoken. Wolfe sat in his chair, vast and unmoving, a glass of beer balanced on the armrest. Fritz had retired in wounded silence after being told dinner would again be postponed by homicide. Quaid occupied the chair nearest the door, as though considering flight but lacking the nerve. I paced. Wolfe thought best when I moved, it gave him something kinetic to ignore. The assistant district councilman, I said. Clean office, no struggle, dead behind his desk. Sound familiar? Wolfe nodded slightly. Consistency is the murderer's confession. Quaid's voice was strained. He was not my client. Then you're slipping, I said. Or someone's expanding the collection. Wolfe's eyes flicked to me. That is careless phrasing, Archie. But accurate. He turned to Quaid. Tell me, Mr. Quaid, when you began this enterprise, what compelled you? Quaid frowned. I saw what secrets did when mishandled. Ruined families. Careers. Lives. And so, Wolfe said, you chose to mishandle them yourself. Quaid bristled. I kept them safe. Wolfe leaned forward slightly. No. You curated them. You classified and indexed human weakness. That is not protection. That is control. I watched Quaid closely. He wasn't angry. He was wounded. That mattered. Wolfe continued, the man who copies your index does not fear exposure. Quaid looked up sharply. How can you say that? Because fear produces chaos, Wolfe said. What we observe is order. Selection. Precision. The murderer is not acting defensively. He is asserting ownership. Yes, Wolfe said. But not like you. Quaid stiffened. What does that mean? It means, Wolfe said, that you collect secrets to contain them. The murderer collects secrets to wield them. I stopped pacing. So he's not hiding. He's negotiating. Wolfe inclined his head. With the city. Before Quaid could respond, the phone rang. I beat it to the desk. Goodwin. A man's voice, breathless. This is Samuel Klein. The building manager. My shoulders tightened. Talk, I said. They tried to kill me, Klein said. I closed my eyes briefly. Where are you? My apartment. Someone tampered with the gas line. I smelled it in time. I glanced at Wolfe. He was already reaching for another beer, which for him meant the night had entered a new phase. Stay put, I told Klein. Open windows. We'll send someone. I hung up. Wolfe said calmly, an attempted murder. Failed, I said. That's new. Wolfe's eyes were bright now. Failure is revealing. Quaid was shaking. This is escalating. No, Wolfe said. It is correcting. I grabbed my coat. I'll check on Klein. Do so, Wolfe said. Observe everything. Klein's apartment was a modest place over a bakery, the air still faintly sweet despite the stench of gas. He was pale, sweating, eyes darting like a trapped animal's. They didn't want me dead, he kept saying. Just scared. Why you? I asked. I manage access, he said weakly. Everyone thinks I know everything. Do you? He shook his head violently. I never opened the vault. But you could, I said. He hesitated. In theory. That was enough to file away. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe listened to my report without interruption. When I finished, he nodded once. The murderer is applying pressure, he said. Removing uncertainty. And showing mercy, I said. Why not finish Klein? Wolfe's lips curved slightly. Because killing him would be inefficient. That's comforting, I said. In a morbid way. Wolfe went on, the murderer wishes to be acknowledged. Feared. But not exposed. I leaned against the desk. You said earlier that the killer isn't afraid of exposure. Now you're saying he avoids it. Wolfe smiled faintly. A contradiction only in appearance. He is not afraid of his exposure. He fears the loss of narrative control. That sat with me. He wants to tell the story. Yes, Wolfe said. On his terms. The phone rang again. This time, Inspector Kramer. Archie, he said. Your friend Klein almost got cooked. We know, I said. You catching on? Kramer snorted. We're protecting the rest. But I'll tell you this, whoever's doing it knows procedures. Knows routines. I glanced at Wolfe. He was watching me intently. Thanks, I said. Keep me posted. When I hung up, Wolfe spoke immediately. Routines. Habits, I said. Yes, Wolfe agreed. The murderer selects victims who adhere to predictable patterns. Lasker's breakfast, I said. The councilman's late office hours. Klein's nightly check. And you, Wolfe added mildly. I blinked. Me. You are predictable, Wolfe said. Impatient. Curious. Mobile. I grinned. I feel seen. You should feel cautious, Wolfe replied. That night, Wolfe asked me to recount every interaction again. Every pause. Every reaction. I noticed something new as I spoke, something that had been nagging me without shape. Hale, I said slowly. When Lasker died, Hale reacted, politely. But when we mentioned the copied index, he seemed almost impressed. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Continue. And Porter, I went on. She was angry. Defensive. Klein was terrified. Quaid's been unraveling. And Hale? Wolfe prompted. Calm, I said. Too calm. Wolfe nodded. Control. Exactly, I said. He's not afraid of exposure. He's afraid of losing control. Wolfe leaned back, steepling his fingers. That is the psychology of a true collector. The phrase hung there. I said, you think Hale's replacing Quaid? I think, Wolfe said, that someone believes the secrets belong to whoever can manage them best. The phone rang again. I answered, half expecting another near death. Instead, Rachel Moore's voice came through, shaky but steadying. Mr. Goodwin, Mr. Quaid is missing. I felt my stomach tighten. What do you mean, missing? He didn't come home. His apartment's empty. His safe, open. I looked at Wolfe. His eyes closed briefly. Did they take anything? I asked. Yes, she said. The original index. I hung up slowly. Wolfe spoke before I could. Now the game changes. Because? I asked. Because, Wolfe said, the murderer no longer needs to threaten. He possesses the artifact. And Quaid? I asked. Wolfe's voice was grave. Mr. Quaid has either been abducted, or absorbed. I ran a hand through my hair. We're running out of time. No, Wolfe said calmly. We are approaching clarity. How do you figure? I snapped. Because, Wolfe said, the murderer has revealed his objective. To collect everything, I said. Yes, Wolfe agreed. And now, Archie, we must provoke him. I stared. You want to poke the man holding the city's darkest secrets. I want, Wolfe said, to force him to act where I can observe him. He picked up his beer, took a deliberate sip, and added, tomorrow, we convene everyone again. For another talk. I said. For a confession, Wolfe replied. I looked at the orchids, at the shadows climbing the bookcases, at Wolfe, immovable, brilliant, infuriating. Just one question, I said. Wolfe raised an eyebrow. If Hale's the type who collects for control, I said, what does he do with the originals? Wolfe's eyes gleamed. He keeps them close. And suddenly, I knew what Wolfe would be watching for in that room tomorrow, not words, not alibis, but possession. Because secrets, once they fight back, always reveal who truly owns them. Chapter 6, The Room of Confessions. If Wolfe had believed in theatrics, he would have been a menace. As it was, he believed in rooms. Rooms, to Wolfe, were instruments. You chose the right one, arranged the furniture correctly, controlled the lighting and the temperature, and human beings did the rest of the work for you. They shifted, fidgeted, revealed themselves. All Wolfe had to do was sit still and watch. So when he told me to assemble everyone in the office at 11 sharp, I knew it wasn't a social call. By 10:55 the brownstone was breathing tension. The orchids loomed over Wolfe's desk like pale eavesdroppers. Fritz had been banished to the kitchen with instructions to make coffee and remain invisible. Wolfe sat in his red leather armchair, monumental as ever, fingers steepled, beer waiting untouched, an unmistakable sign that he meant business before pleasure. I checked my watch. They're punctual, I said. That's either respect or fear. Fear is more reliable, Wolfe replied. Elaine Porter arrived first, precise as a court filing. She took the chair to Wolfe's left, posture impeccable, eyes sharp. Martin Hale followed, relaxed, smiling faintly, looking like a man who had come to negotiate terms rather than face judgment. Samuel Klein arrived last, pale and sweating, as though the gas from the night before still lingered in his lungs. One chair remained empty. Quaid's. I felt it like a missing tooth. Before we begin, I said, for those keeping score, Mr. Quaid is still missing. Hale raised an eyebrow. Unfortunate. Porter said nothing. Klein swallowed. Wolfe did not comment. He waited until the room settled, then spoke. We are here, he said calmly, to clarify ownership. Hale chuckled softly. Ownership of what? Wolfe's eyes fixed on him. Of secrets, Mr. Hale. Do not pretend ignorance. It ill suits you. Hale's smile thinned but did not vanish. Secrets are ideas. No one owns ideas. On the contrary, Wolfe said, ideas are frequently owned. That is why men steal them. I leaned against the desk, arms crossed. Let's make this simple. 2 men are dead. 1 man is missing. Someone copied an index of secrets and used it to apply pressure, with murder as punctuation. Klein flinched at the word. Wolfe continued, the murderer is among us. But I am not prepared, yet, to accuse him. Porter frowned. Then why are we here? Because, Wolfe said, confession is a process, not an event. Hale laughed outright. You expect us to confess? No, Wolfe said. I expect you to react. That got their attention. Wolfe gestured to me. Archie. I stepped forward. We're going to talk about secrets. Not specifics, don't relax, but categories. Porter stiffened. Hale leaned back. Klein's hands trembled. Mr. Klein, Wolfe said gently, you feared for your life last night. Yes, Klein said hoarsely. Someone tampered with my gas. And yet, Wolfe said, you were not killed. Klein nodded miserably. Why? Wolfe asked. Klein shook his head. I don't know. Because, Wolfe said, your death would have served no purpose. You possess access, not authority. Hale smiled faintly. Interesting theory. Wolfe ignored him and turned to Porter. You warned Mr. Quaid about centralization. Yes, Porter said. I advised safeguards. Legal safeguards, Wolfe said. Not moral ones. She bristled. I'm a lawyer. Exactly, Wolfe said. I watched her hands. She'd clasped them tightly, knuckles white. Controlled tension. Wolfe shifted his gaze to Hale. You wish to monetize the collection. Hale shrugged. Information has value. Indeed, Wolfe said. But value requires scarcity. Order. Control. Hale's eyes flickered. Wolfe leaned forward slightly. Tell me, Mr. Hale, when Edward Lasker died, were you surprised? Hale considered. Men like Lasker live dangerously. That is not an answer, Wolfe said. Hale smiled again. Then yes. I was surprised. I cut in. Funny thing, you didn't look surprised. Hale turned to me. You're observant. I type, I said. It trains the eyes. Wolfe raised a hand, silencing us. We will proceed differently. He reached into his desk drawer and removed a folder. He did not open it. He merely placed it on the blotter, centered, deliberate. This, Wolfe said, is not the index. Hale's gaze snapped to it. Porter glanced, then looked away. Klein stared at it like a snake. It is, Wolfe continued, a reconstruction. Partial. Based on memory, inference, and corroboration. That was news to me. Wolfe hadn't told me he'd done that. Which meant he hadn't, at least not fully. Wolfe enjoyed bluffing with furniture. The murderer, Wolfe said, has assumed that possession of the original index grants him supremacy. Hale folded his hands. And does it not? No, Wolfe said. Because power lies not in possession, but in understanding. Hale's smile faded. Wolfe turned his attention to Porter. You understand systems. She nodded cautiously. And you, Wolfe said to Hale, understand leverage. Hale inclined his head. Naturally. And you, Wolfe said to Klein, understand routines. Klein nodded miserably. Wolfe let the silence stretch. The room thickened. The orchid seemed to lean closer. Then Wolfe said, the murderer is not afraid of exposure. Porter looked up sharply. That's absurd. No, Wolfe said. Exposure implies loss. Our murderer anticipates gain. Hale's fingers tapped once on the arm of his chair. Just once. I saw it. Wolfe continued, he killed Edward Lasker not to silence him, Lasker was already silent, but to demonstrate authority. Hale said lightly, you're very confident. Yes, Wolfe said. Because the murderer made an error. All three leaned forward now. He attempted murder last night, Wolfe said, and failed. Klein gasped. That failure, Wolfe went on, was deliberate. A warning. Warnings are inefficient unless the recipient understands them. Porter said, this is all conjecture. Wolfe's eyes were ice. No. This is psychology. He shifted his gaze, scanning faces, noting posture, breathing, stillness. I followed his lead, watching hands, eyes, the way each person occupied space. Then Wolfe did something unexpected. He stopped. He leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. The room froze. Seconds passed. Maybe more. Finally, Wolfe opened his eyes and said quietly, "Archie." The detail. I straightened. My heart thumped once, hard. I knew what he meant. "All night," I said slowly, "I've been thinking about Quaid." 3 pairs of eyes fixed on me. About how careful he was, I continued. How methodical. How obsessed with order. And about the one thing he never did. "What is that?" Porter asked. "He never carried the index on him," I said. "Not the original. Not copies. He trusted systems, not pockets." Wolfe nodded. "So," I went on, "who here treats secrets like something that should be kept close?" Hale smiled faintly. "You're speculating." "Yes," I said. "But Wolfe's watching." Wolfe's gaze was locked on Hale now, unwavering. "Mr. Hale," Wolfe said, "stand up." Hale hesitated, just a fraction of a second, then rose. "Empty your pockets," Wolfe said. Porter inhaled sharply. Klein stared. Hale laughed. "This is ridiculous." "Do it," Wolfe said. Hale's smile vanished. Slowly, deliberately, he reached into his jacket and removed a wallet, keys, a cigarette case. Then, from an inner pocket, he produced a folded sheaf of paper. Typed. Indexed. My stomach tightened. Wolfe did not move. He did not reach for the papers. He merely observed Hale's face as the realization settled. "Those," Wolfe said softly, "are not copies." Hale's jaw set. "You can't prove." "I can," Wolfe said, "but not yet." The room vibrated with tension. Porter looked horrified. Klein looked relieved and terrified at once. Wolfe raised a hand. "This meeting is adjourned." "What?" I said. "Yes," Wolfe said. "The final act requires refinement." Hale stared at him. "You're letting me leave?" "For the moment," Wolfe said. "I wish to observe your next decision." Hale hesitated, then turned and left. When the door closed, I rounded on Wolfe. "You had him." "No," Wolfe said calmly. "I had his confidence." "That's not enough," I said. "It is sufficient," Wolfe replied. "Because guilt revealed prematurely becomes defiant." He picked up his beer at last and took a long sip. "Tomorrow," Wolfe said, "we finish this." I looked at the empty chair where Quaid should have been. "And Quaid?" I asked. Wolfe's eyes were distant. "Mr. Quaid," he said, "is the final proof." Outside, a taxi horn blared. Somewhere in the city, a man who believed secrets belonged to him was deciding his next move. And Wolfe, immovable in his chair, was already 3 moves ahead. Chapter 7, The Collector Unmasked. Wolfe finished his beer at precisely 4 minutes past 11, set the glass down with a soft, decisive click, and said my name. Archie. That was all. No lecture. No preamble. Just the signal that the machine had completed its calculations. I stopped pacing. The brownstone felt tighter than it ever had, like the walls had leaned in to listen. The orchids glistened under their lights, smug with humidity. Outside, New York honked and hissed and pretended it wasn't holding its breath. "You want him back," I said. "I want him observed," Wolfe corrected. "He will return." "How do you know?" I asked. "Because," Wolfe said calmly, "Mr. Hale believes this is a negotiation." Negotiators return to the table. The phone rang as if on cue. I answered. "Goodwin." Inspector Kramer's voice came through, gravelly and impatient. "You still playing chess over there, Archie?" "We prefer checkers," I said. "Less pieces, more blood." "Cute," Kramer said. "We picked up a tail you asked for." "Hale's been circling. Looks like he's deciding where to land." I looked at Wolfe. He nodded once. Send him here, I said. There was a pause. Then Kramer grunted. You better be right. I usually am, I said. On Thursdays. I hung up and turned to Wolfe. He's coming. Yes, Wolfe said. And he will bring Mr. Quaid. My eyebrows went up. Alive? Wolfe's eyes flicked to the orchids. I believe so. Why? Because, Wolfe said, Mr. Hale does not destroy artifacts he believes increase his authority. The doorbell rang 15 minutes later. This time, it was not polite. I opened the door to find Martin Hale flanked by 2 detectives and Inspector Kramer, who looked like a man bracing for disappointment. Hale was immaculate as ever, except for his eyes. They were bright. Excited. Between them stood Nathaniel Quaid. Alive. Pale. Furious. But alive. Archie, Kramer said. Explain. Come in, I said. The furniture likes an audience. We filed into the office. Wolfe did not rise. He did not acknowledge Hale. His eyes went straight to Quaid. You are injured, Wolfe said. Drugged, Quaid snapped. Confined. Threatened. Wolfe nodded. I apologize for the inconvenience. Quaid stared. Inconvenience? Wolfe held up a hand. Later. Hale smiled. You're very calm for a man about to be wrong. Wolfe regarded him. On the contrary, Mr. Hale. I am calm because I am correct. Kramer folded his arms. Let's have it, Wolfe. Wolfe gestured slightly. Archie. I stepped forward. This started with a man who collected secrets and believed control equaled safety. That man was Quaid. Quaid flinched but didn't interrupt. He indexed secrets, I continued, thinking that organization meant protection. But someone else saw that index and realized what it really was. Hale tilted his head. A liability. No, Wolfe said quietly. A map. All eyes turned to him. Wolfe spoke evenly, each word placed with care. The index reduced human frailty to a system. Whoever possessed it could predict behavior, apply pressure, and enforce silence. Hale chuckled. You make it sound almost admirable. Wolfe's gaze sharpened. Admiration is irrelevant. Kramer said, get to the murders. Yes, Wolfe said. Edward Lasker was killed first. Not because he was dangerous, but because he was demonstrative. His death was quiet, precise, and symbolic. Symbolic of what? Kramer demanded. Authority, Wolfe replied. The murderer quoted a secret to prove possession, then killed Lasker to prove consequence. Quaid shouted, you murdered him. Hale laughed. You indexed him. Wolfe raised a finger. Then came the second death. A public official. Again, predictable routine. Again, quiet. The message was clear, the collection had expanded. Kramer's jaw tightened. And Klein. A warning, Wolfe said. A failed attempt to reinforce hierarchy without waste. Hale said, you're speculating. No, Wolfe said. I am deducing. He leaned forward slightly. Mr. Hale, you wished to monetize secrets. But you did not want chaos. Chaos devalues information. Hale's smile flickered. You wanted order, Wolfe continued. A system superior to Quaid's. One where you, not he, decided price and punishment. Quaid's face twisted with rage. You stole my life's work. I perfected it, Hale replied coldly. Kramer said, so you kidnapped him? Hale shrugged. Temporary custody. Wolfe nodded. You kept him alive because he validated your possession. Without him, your claim to authority would be incomplete. I added, you didn't kill Quaid because you needed him as provenance. Hale looked at me sharply. You're clever. I type fast, I said. Wolfe continued, your error, Mr. Hale, was intellectual. Hale frowned. Meaning? You believed, Wolfe said, that possession of secrets conferred ownership. You failed to recognize that secrets are relational. Hale scoffed. Meaningless. On the contrary, Wolfe said. A secret derives power from the belief that it can be exposed. But exposure requires credibility. Kramer leaned forward. Which he didn't have. Precisely, Wolfe said. Mr. Hale attempted to assume Quaid's authority without inheriting his trust. The index was useless without the network that sustained it. Quaid blinked. You couldn't sell them. Hale's jaw tightened. You couldn't even threaten effectively, Wolfe went on. Because once it became known that you possessed the index illegitimately, its value would collapse. Hale laughed bitterly. You think that stops me? It already has, Wolfe said. Inspector Kramer. Kramer stepped forward. We've got enough. Kidnapping. 2 murders. Attempted murder. Possession of stolen documents. Hale's face hardened. You're making a mistake. Wolfe's voice was calm. No. You did. Hale glanced around, calculating, then made a move for the door. I moved faster. I don't like to brag, but years of chasing suspects up stairwells and across alleys have taught me one thing: men who think they own everything forget about gravity. Hale didn't get far. Kramer slapped the cuffs on him, muttering something about paperwork and ulcers. Quaid sank into a chair, shaking. It's over. Wolfe regarded him. The violence is. Quaid looked up. And the secrets? Wolfe's eyes were hard. They will be addressed. Kramer said, we'll take custody of the documents. Wolfe nodded. Appropriate. Quaid looked at Wolfe, desperation naked now. You understand what I tried to do? Yes, Wolfe said. That does not absolve you. Quaid bowed his head. As Hale was led out, he turned once, eyes blazing. You think you've won? Wolfe met his gaze. I think, he said, that you mistook control for power. The door closed. Silence settled. I exhaled slowly. That's one collector off the market. Wolfe picked up his beer and took a sip. No, he said. That is one illusion dispelled. Quaid looked at the orchids, at Wolfe, at me. What happens now? Wolfe leaned back into his chair, immovable as ever. Now, he said, we restore proportion. I glanced around the office, at the desk where secrets had been named and unmasked. Outside, New York resumed its noise, relieved to have survived another night of whispered sins. But I knew one thing for sure. The city never really forgets its secrets. It only changes who's foolish enough to collect them. Chapter 8, What Remains Unspoken. Morning in the brownstone returned the way it always did, reluctantly, with pale light sneaking through the windows like it hoped no one would notice. The orchids were already awake, smug and immaculate, as if they'd had nothing to do with murder, blackmail, or the general collapse of civilized behavior. Wolfe was in his chair. That alone told me the world had not ended. He was dictating a letter when I came down the stairs, voice calm, precise, and faintly irritated, his natural resting state. And therefore, Wolfe was saying, your assumption that discretion may be subcontracted is naive. Discretion, like integrity, is indivisible. He waved a hand. Period. I hit the typewriter and finished the sentence. Strong stuff, I said. Hallmark should sell it with a ribbon. Wolfe ignored that. He reached for his beer, checked the clock, and frowned. Archie, he said, it is 5 minutes past 11. Which means orchids, I said. Yes, Wolfe replied. An order. That word again. Order. After the past few days, it sounded almost obscene. Inspector Kramer arrived an hour later, smelling of tobacco, paperwork, and grudging respect. He dropped into a chair and looked at Wolfe like a man inspecting a bridge he'd crossed unwillingly but successfully. "Hale's talking," Kramer said. "Not much. But enough." Wolfe nodded. "As expected." Quaid signed over everything, Kramer continued. "Documents, storage access, the works. We'll lock it down. And destroy it," Wolfe said calmly. Kramer blinked. "Destroy it?" "Yes," Wolfe said. "Secrets are volatile. They should not be warehoused." Kramer sighed. "You ever think of running for office?" "No," Wolfe said. "I dislike incompetence." Kramer snorted. "Figures." After he left, the house settled into its familiar rhythm. Fritz prepared lunch with pointed enthusiasm, the sort that said this better be the last corpse for a while. Wolfe resumed his reading. I resumed pacing. Quaid arrived in the afternoon, subdued, thinner somehow, as though the absence of his index had taken a piece of him with it. He stood awkwardly in front of Wolfe's desk, hands empty for once. "I came to thank you," he said. Wolfe did not look up. "Gratitude is unnecessary." Quaid swallowed. "You saved my life." "Possibly," Wolfe said. "But you endangered it first." Quaid winced. "I believed I was preventing harm." "You believed," Wolfe said, "that knowledge without accountability is neutral. It is not." I leaned against the desk. "You made a museum out of other people's worst moments." Quaid nodded. "And I charged admission." Wolfe looked at him then, eyes sharp. "What will you do now?" Quaid hesitated. "I don't know." "Good," Wolfe said. "Ignorance may be therapeutic." Quaid managed a weak smile. "You're a hard man." "I am a precise one," Wolfe replied. Quaid left quietly, without asking for forgiveness. Wolfe would have refused it anyway. That evening, as Fritz served dinner, finally, mercifully, I noticed Wolfe eating with particular care, as though savoring the return of routine. He finished, dabbed his lips, and leaned back. "Archie," he said, "you are restless." "I usually am," I said. "But this one's sticking." "Why?" Wolfe asked. I considered. "Because Hale wasn't entirely wrong. Secrets do have value." "Yes," Wolfe agreed. "And that is precisely why they are dangerous." I poured myself a drink. "You ever tempted to collect something like that?" Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "Never. Not even a little." "No," Wolfe said firmly. "Because possession implies responsibility. And responsibility, in this context, is intolerable." I nodded. That tracked. Later, after the dishes were cleared and the city settled into its nocturnal hum, I sat at my desk and typed the last report. Words came easily now. The facts were orderly. The conclusions neat. But the truth, what remained unspoken, sat between the lines. New York thrives on secrets. Brownstones, taxis, diners at 3 in the morning, they all hum with them. Most people carry theirs quietly, like old scars. Some try to sell them. Others try to own them. And some, like Hale, mistake control for power and learn too late that secrets don't belong to anyone. Wolfe closed his book and looked at the orchids. "Archie," he said, "this case was not about murder." "No." I said. "No," Wolfe replied. "It was about arrogance." I smiled. "That's most cases." "Indeed," Wolfe said. The phone rang once more. I reached for it automatically, then paused. For the first time in days, I wasn't eager. But it was only a wrong number. I hung up and leaned back, listening to the steady, comforting sounds of the brownstone at rest. Somewhere in the city, secrets were being whispered, buried, forgotten, or forgiven. And here, in Wolfe's office, they had been weighed, exposed, and, at last, put down. Wolfe lifted his beer in a small, private gesture. "To silence," he said. I raised mine. "And to knowing when not to break it." Outside, a taxi horn blared, impatient as ever. New York moved on. So did we.